We're going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We've been pulling together webinars as fast as we can to give you information. Many of you, if you hopefully get in our emails, we're sending updated information as everything changes. I did want to let you guys know, if you are a small business and wondering whether you can operate or not under the amended governor's memo, give us a call. We're talking through that. We have a process with the City of Broken Arrow as we make those decisions. I know the governor's amended memo late last night was very broad. And so we've talked through some ways that we can make sure that as many businesses can stay open while still also protecting the public health. So you can reach out to us or the City of Broken Arrow, and we will let you know, help you navigate this really challenging time. So on that part, this is a part of our small business series. We normally do this in person, but we're doing it virtually now. So thanks for joining us. I did want to recognize our sponsors of the small business. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Small business series, which is our partners, Aero Exterminators, Hightower, AVB Bank, as well as GTR Media Group, IBT, Southwestern Payroll, Tulsa Tech, Tulsa Drillers, and Lamar. But today we've got three people who've pulled together incredible information for us. One thing I do want to say to Scott Wise and give him complete props for what he's doing for our business community. Armada Consulting is stepping in every way possible. His heart has been to help every business, small and large, navigate this. So thank you, Scott, for your leadership in pulling this together, making sure this happens, this information that you've pulled together for us and are be presenting today. Same thing with the Greg Graham, CEO and Chairman of the Board of First National Bank, Broken Arrow. Financials and information is most crucial to all of our businesses right now, and our local banks are going to be even more important as this next phase, as this CARE Act is passed. They're going to be your frontline lenders and helping you navigate this. And Cassie Richardson, Senior Human Specialist with Members Insperity HR company that can help you in a lot of different ways navigating this, not only now, but your HR issues going forward. So I'm going to hand it over to Scott, and I'm going to be navigating it, so they will be telling me when to advance slides. But Scott Wise, I'm going to throw it on to you.
Yeah, go ahead to the next slide there, Jennifer. So I'm Scott Wise. I'm president of Armada Consulting. I'm also vice chair of the Broken Arrow Economic Development Corporation, but probably more importantly, I'm an entrepreneur and a small business owner just like all of you, and I'm trying to deal with the same challenge you are. Hopefully, what we put together.
If you could mute yourself if you're not talking.
Please enter meeting ID followed by pound.
If everybody could mute my connection.
Not entered any numbers. Please re-enter meeting ID.
All right, go on. Keep going.
Okay. So, what I was saying is I'm a small business owner just like the rest of you, going through these same challenges, and hopefully today's session will provide some perspective, some tips, some hope, and some guidance on what to do next as a small business owner. Next slide, Jennifer. So first I want everybody to just take a deep breath, relax, and don't overreact. First I want to discuss a little bit about rationalizing our fears. This is not the end of the world, nor is it some conspiracy political hoax. So please don't feed into the frenzy. It's just going to further disrupt things and extend the economic crisis, longer than it has to. Second, I'm going to talk a little bit about forecasting our finances. This is going to be extremely difficult to do given all the uncertainty.
Everybody could mute everything, all of their, so we can keep going. All right.
Um, Jennifer, am I back now? Okay. But previous slide, I want to finish there, Jennifer. Other way. So the second part of this is extremely important to take the time to forecast your finances. I know it's difficult given the uncertainty, but this is very much like when you started your business. You need to really make some honest assumptions, work the problem, be flexible, and willing to replan with every new week and new challenges that come up. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then lastly, I want to encourage everybody to focus on what matters most, gain some perspective, do your part, be productive, and let's focus on the future recovery, not the immediate panic. Next slide. The first thing to remember is the timeline for the economic recovery is unknown. There's some positive signs coming out of China, but that took very drastic measures to get there, and they are just now starting to see some economic recovery in the places hardest hit there. Timeline's unknown, but 8 weeks is probably not unrealistic. But it's just like the virus outbreak, the economic recovery is going to be dependent upon people making rational decisions regarding their business. If we look back a month ago, the economy was strong, positive, and the recession outlook was decreasing. But there was no recession triggers or immediate bubbles. The real risk is our response to this may cause those types of recession triggers. So it's important for everybody to do their part, do their best, and plan accordingly. Next slide, Jennifer. Just to give everybody an idea of the magnitude of the economic crisis, it's still unknown, but it's an unprecedented shock to the economy. If you think about the timeline of the 2008 crisis, that occurred over 17 months and ended up taking about $8 trillion out of market value and an unemployment peak of 10.9%. The current crisis is an unprecedented shock just happening over the last couple of weeks with market value drops of about 11 trillion. And there are estimates out there that say we could be anywhere, we're going to exceed the 10% unemployment. And, there's been estimates out there of 20%. What you can probably expect from this is there are going to be aggressive and swift layoffs. There's going to be increases in credit defaults. It could affect home values, increases in bankruptcies. This is such an extreme event that, in predictive analytics, people refer to black swan events when they're stress testing banks and things like this. In the context of 2008 would have been a black swan event. This crisis would be more like a rainbow tie-dyed swan event. So it's unprecedented. Everybody's going to need to be patient, make the most generous assumptions, and plan accordingly. Next slide, Jennifer. The other thing to think about is, I know we've all seen the flatten the curve with regard to infection, but we probably should get used to this curve as it applies to more than what you think, right? This is such a shock to the system. It's more than just hospitalizations, infections, toilet paper, so on and so forth. We can expect this same wave coming through in the need for government assistance, unemployment, SBA lending, credit defaults, bankruptcies, so on and so forth. Flatten the curve applies to about every aspect of our businesses as well, as the issues that we need to address as businesses as well, including thinking about what's going to happen when we get the all clear in terms of our businesses so that we can properly recover. So just like this wave has come through with negative items, that we have to deal with, when we get the all clear, we could expect an echo of that same curve in terms of demand as people are wanting to get out, dine out more, reconnect with people, shop more, even the employee and the talent base. People are going to want to rehire people that they've been laying off. So the actions that we take now are going to also affect our ability to recover. So the last thing anybody should do is throw up their hands, give up. They need to focus on the potential recovery, not just the immediate panic. So the other thing that we're learning through all this is we're learning how we're all interconnected. Our economy depends on rational flow of commerce. My customers, come into my business. I spend money. My profit margins are going to go down. Money goes out for employees. Money goes out for suppliers. Money goes out to bankers. All of which are customers of other businesses. So that interconnectivity, our economy depends on a rational flow of commerce. And what we've seen is just with the shutdowns is that that's just seizing everything up. It's important for businesses to start projecting out their cash flow, probably even on a weekly basis, just to be able to make informed decisions. So I'll go through kind of an example of how we did this at Armada. You'll have to advance a little bit there, Jennifer. So, we started this process 3 weeks ago when the travel restrictions came in. Armada is a business that's dependent upon us consulting with large banks all over the country, and travel is part of that. When we saw that come through, we started to evaluate what are our top 20% of our customers likely to do in the coming weeks. We made phone calls, we asked, we started doing projections. That led us to basically think about how do we need to change our business model to meet those minimum projected needs for business continuity? So we started saying, well, we're going to have to start trying to do some more local work. We met with other community bankers in our own town, so on and so forth, and then could start to assess what does that mean for us in terms of the money on hand, the cash that could potentially be coming in compared to the money going out so that we can make some decisions. Our decisions we needed to look for ways to flatten our own curve. If I lay everybody off, the information that I got from my customers wasn't good. It's pretty much Q2 was going to be horrible. Q3, we'd see a little bit more stuff coming in, and Q4, we may be able to be back up to normal operations. So the worst thing I could do is throw up my hands, lay off everybody, and not have any capacity to deal with other people. So now I have to look for ways to flatten my own curve. Look to the bankers, have the communication with the bankers. Can I defer some payments that lets me keep someone onto the payroll longer, right? I took cuts in pay. My employees took cuts in pay. The whole thing was basically built around how do I extend my timeline or flatten my own curve. At the same time, we have to understand what are downstream impacts of every tough decision that we have to make. The bakery next door to our offices, that are empty is going to suffer. The bartender down the street is going to suffer. I need to think about those downstream impacts to the other businesses and the customers that are going to be impacted by the decisions that I'm making now. And then that was week 1. Week 2, all of that started changing. I had to go through the process over and over again to make the best decisions that I can for my company with the best information that I have at the time I need to make them, which is why we started forecasting this out on a week-by-week basis. Week 2 provided new challenges, and we go through the process again. It is not an unsolvable problem. It just has to be worked, right? The other aspect of that is that requires everybody to communicate your position honestly to stakeholders, and that means your family, your employees, your suppliers, your customers, your creditors. The more conversations that you can have, the better information that you can make decisions off of. So if there's a deferred payment option, great. What does that do to your weekly forecast so that I can keep employees on? What does that do can vendors take half payment? Can suppliers take those types of things? Everything's going to be dependent upon communication and continuing the flow of commerce to the best way possible that you can do. Do your part. Last, I think it's important for everybody to find some focus and really focus on what's important now. I know everybody's probably screaming a lot of different F words than these, but These are the positive ones. Don't get them out of order, right? Faith, stay connected spiritually, there's hope. But also have faith in your confidence and your capabilities to recover from this. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of your business. Make smart decisions. Fitness. If we don't follow the public health guidelines, it's just going to extend further. If we can't stay healthy, nothing else matters. Family. There's turmoil in everybody's family. Take the time to connect and calm people down, even within where you're sheltered and hunkered down now. Come together with a plan for your family to deal with these situations. Don't forget about your friends. Maintain social distance, but maintain positive connections. I've had more video chats with family members and friends than I can remember. Stay connected. Help those in need any way that you possibly can. Fortune and our businesses are really last. Make informed but tough data-driven decisions. It's going to hurt, but there is going to be a recovery. Plan for that strong recovery and don't give up. The pandemic will resolve, the economy will resolve. It will take time. Use this time to focus on what matters most. Hopefully that helps from that perspective. I'm also doing these with smaller groups just to talk through businesses, our other local businesses. Jennifer can share my contact information if you'd like to participate in that.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Scott, next we're going to bring up Greg Graham, First National Bank.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity, Jennifer, for giving me a few minutes to speak. So on last Friday, March 20th, SBA declared all 77 Oklahoma counties as a disaster area. And what this means is it will make available a disaster loan program. My understanding, and I am not an SBA expert by any stretch, but these will be direct loans through SBA, and we'll provide information in the next slide on how to go there. And certainly you could link through the Oklahoma Department of Commerce site. But the SBA disaster loan program makes available loans up to $2 million, 30-year amortization, no fees, no points, no refi or prepayment penalties, 12 months to the first payment. My understanding is the rate for businesses is 3.75%. I don't know if that's fixed for the entire 30 years or if that's an initial fixed period. Again, if you're making application, you'll be able to find that information. For nonprofit organizations, I understand the interest rate on those loans to be 2.75%. Again, this is a direct lending program with SBA. Now, last night when the Senate passed the $2 trillion Stimulus Act, I think there will be more SBA monies on the way. The devil's certainly in the details with any sort of government-sponsored loan program, so I would work closely with your lender. Additionally, from a community banking perspective, that's my come from place. I'm third generation community banker. Community banks have a tradition of working with borrowers during difficult times. So this is nothing unusual. And what I would say is that most banks are probably getting flooded right now with requests for assistance from their borrowers. So I would strongly recommend get your financials together. If you are due for a February payment and you're thinking of applying for SBA assistance or seeking some sort of deferment from your local bank, I would work to try to make that February payment. And the reason why is I think March 1 is going to be sort of a cut line that a lot of banks and SBA may be looking at for customers to be current. Again, get your financials from 2019 together. If you don't have tax returns yet, that may be okay as long as you have good and reliable information available. But earlier this week, Sunday night, actually, there was an interagency statement for loan modifications and reporting for financial institutions on working with customers affected by coronavirus. And this is significant because not only are customers, businesses, borrowers going to need assistance from the SBA, but also their local financial institutions. And the significance of this statement is that it provides guidance to banks on how to work with borrowers. And that's important because whether people like it or not, regulators have a role in providing oversight into loan portfolios with banks. So essentially what this means is that banks who are looking at payment ability, looking at customer needs, and are responsible with how they proceed, this will not be held against banks. And that's important for businesses to know that as well. Just one note, unfortunately, during times like this, you will find some unscrupulous individuals with less than positive motives trying to find opportunities to fleece seniors or other individuals. So be cautious. Also, when working remotely, as you can see, I'm working remotely today, not in my office. Unfortunately, I'm not in San Francisco, and I'm in my living room, like many of you may be as well. But I would suggest you try to follow the policies and procedures of your organization. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Jennifer. Yes, so I mentioned the SBA special loan program, the disaster program. There may be another coming out. I know that on Friday, 1 o'clock Central, there will be a joint agency webinar. So again, all bank regulators will be presenting at 1 o'clock on Friday information. So bankers and lenders out there certainly will be glued to this. This situation's developing and changing very quickly. That can be a good thing. But again, banks and SBA and government are here to help. As I mentioned, update the financials, get the personal financial statements together on any company owners, look at what your projections are. If you can demonstrate what the impact has been to your business, that's very important. For instance, I have a customer who is a dentist, and he has decided to follow the ADA guidelines and close except for emergency cases. So it's pretty easy for me to quantify the disruption to his income. So in the last bullet point is think of this as a restartup package. And I think Scott addressed pretty well that you've got to be nimble. You've got to look at adjusting things, staffing, et cetera. So banks and SBA are here to help. Next, I think Karen Kemp, Group of Business Performance Advisor with Insperity, will go ahead and speak.
And one housekeeping note, if you have questions, we're going to do an open general question and answer session at the end for all these speakers. But if you don't want to forget your question, feel free to go ahead and type it into the comments, and we'll get to that and answer those as they come at the end. So go ahead, Karen. Karen, you may be muted if you think you're talking.
There we go.
There we go.
My name is Karen Kemp. I'm a business performance advisor with Insperity, and I cover Eastern Oklahoma. I've got about 15 years experience in the HR field, certified in both the areas PHR and SHRM certified. So before I introduce our main speaker, I do have to put a few disclaimers out there. Insperity is a human resource and business solution company, and we have serviced over 100,000 small to medium-sized businesses since 1986. But today, what we're going to be sharing is best practices, and of course, we're going to be sharing the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. Typically, we've got an in-depth knowledge of each of our clients that we work with in order to make recommendations. We don't have that knowledge of each of your businesses, so we suggest that you consult your attorney, especially if you're in doubt on anything, because we want you to remain compliant. Now I'd like to introduce Kathy Richardson. She is a senior HR specialist with Insperity, and she's been with us for about 11 years, over 18 years experience working in all aspects of HR with small to medium-sized businesses. She holds a bachelor's degree in business administration with a major in human resources from OSU. Go Cowboys. She's been a certified senior professional in human resources for 12 years, and she's also a senior certified professional of the Society of Human Resources. Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, I certainly wish there were different circumstances for our call today, but I do have to say I was a little excited to have this opportunity because even though I'm now located in Dallas, I do have personal ties to Broken Arrow. I lived there in early childhood, and my brother's a graduate of Broken Arrow High School. So we were relocated to Texas with the oil and gas industry early in my childhood, but I still have a lot of family there, have a special place in my heart for Broken Arrow and for Oklahoma. So even though I know these are very uncertain and unprecedented times for everyone, I'm especially mindful of that with the work that I'm doing every day with our clients. I'm hoping that we can provide a little bit more information for you around this act and how it can potentially impact you and your employees. As Karen mentioned, we are going to be providing just some general information. We want you to understand that specific circumstances and issues related to your business can be very unique. So we don't want you to construe this as legal advice. If you have any specific questions, that you should consult with your HR professional or legal counsel with those specific questions. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act was signed into law on March 18th. It has an effective date of April 1st, so right around the corner. That's actually new this week. Initially, it was set up for an effective date of April 2nd, so they've already pushed it back one day. We're hoping they stick with that April 1st date so we can continue to prepare and work with companies in getting them ready for this. There's four main things that it provides emergency action in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. One, it provides a temporary emergency extension or expansion of the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act. It also provides federally mandated paid sick leave that businesses will be required to provide to their employees, and it expands unemployment insurance benefits, as well as provide some tax credits for certain costs associated with the act that businesses will be required to comply with. So today we're going to focus primarily on those first two bullet points and talk about the expansion of FMLA and the requirements under the new Paid Sick Leave Act. So who is covered under the emergency FMLA expansion? So it applies to private employers with fewer than 500 employees. There are some exclusions allowed for certain healthcare providers and emergency responders that are defined within the Act. And it did also detail within the Act that the Department of Labor or the Labor Secretary has the option to exempt certain small businesses with fewer than 50 employees if complying with these provisions under the emergency FMLA expansion would jeopardize the viability of the business. Now that is big, I know, for a lot of companies, because there are many employers who do have less than 50 employees, and they're really wondering, okay, what are my options here? Am I exempt? We are still waiting for additional guidance from the Department of Labor at this point, so we don't know yet what they're going to define as far as who is exempt and what it means to jeopardize the viability of the business. As we all know, sometimes these things can be a little vague, so we're hoping for some very specific information soon from the Department of Labor that helps us better understand who is exempt from this portion of the Act. So eligibility, employees who have been employed for at least 30 days are eligible for this. Anybody who might be a little familiar with FMLA You know that in the past there's been a lot of other requirements. They have to work at least 1,250 hours for 1 year. None of those things apply in this. If they've been employed for at least 30 calendar days, they're eligible under this emergency FMLA expansion. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So reasons for leave under this temporary expansion. Basically, this is going to apply to any employee who is unable to work or telework, work from home, and they would be able to take a leave of absence to care for their son or daughter who's under 18 years of age if that child's school or daycare place of care has been closed, or they're unable to find childcare due to the public health emergency. So as we all know, schools across the nation have already extended spring breaks. They have provided for closures. Some states have even said they're closing for the remainder of the school year. So this is already happening across the U.S. There are multiple businesses impacted by that potentially. So for the school or daycare closure and the expansion and the eligibility for leave, employees are eligible for up to 12 weeks of leave if they qualify for the time off. So the initial 10 days of that time can be unpaid. However, it is suggested within the act that employees be allowed to use any available vacation, personal sick leave, and the other portion of the act that we're going to talk about in a minute also allows for some of that time to be paid. So absences beyond that 10 days must be paid at 2/3 of the employee's regular rate of pay or base salary. There is a cap of $200 per day per employee or $10,000 in aggregate. This law does not provide a new 12-week entitlement. So if you have employees who have already used a portion of their FMLA leave for the base period that you apply FMLA, they would only be eligible for as much time as they have remaining. But anybody who hasn't used any time is eligible for up to 12 weeks. Okay, we can move to the next one. So what are the notice requirements? Sorry, our slides for some reason got a little wonky in this transfer here, but what are the notice requirements? Employees only have to provide notice of leave as is practicable. Again, very vague. The stance that we're taking is that an advance notice is probably not going to come very easily. So you would want to work with your internal human resources or your outside counsel if you are going to request that an employee give a certain amount of notice of probably more than just a few days before the leave starts. Okay, we can move to the next. So the leave is job protected. As I think most of us know, FMLA does provide a job protection element. There are some exceptions to this. Employers that have fewer than 25 employees, and if the position no longer exists due to economic conditions that have affected the employer's operations or that particular position due to COVID, that would be an exception. However, you do have to make reasonable efforts to restore that employee to a same or equivalent position over the course of a year following the beginning of their leave date. So basically, if you have an employee who you have these positions that you are not needing at the time, and you have to do a layoff, once business resumes and you start rehiring, this employee would have to be offered that position for a period of 1 year from the date that they actually start the leave or from the date that the qualifying need concludes. All right, so let's talk about the emergency paid sick portion of the Act. So again, this applies to companies with fewer than 500 employees. The paid sick leave requirement applies to all employees. So whether they were hired last week or 7 years ago, everybody who is currently working for a business would be covered by the emergency paid sick leave portion of the Act. Okay. All right, so there are 6 reasons that an employee may request or be allowed to take paid sick leave under this new Act. The first, and probably the most relevant to so many businesses, is that they are subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation due to COVID-19. So that applies to many companies across the U.S. And we'll talk more about that. Secondly, they are advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns related to COVID-19. So they themselves have either been exposed or they are experiencing symptoms, which is number 3, and they're seeking a diagnosis or seeking medical advice as a result. And for the bottom 3 reasons, number 4, employees caring for an individual who needs to quarantine or isolate, so they're taking care of someone. Our current interpretation of the Act is that does not have to be a dependent as defined by the FMLA. It could be a grandparent or a brother or a sister, basically anybody that they are caring for, they could request emergency paid sick leave to do that. The employee is caring for their child under the school closure. So if you have an employee who is affected by the closures of school and they have to or daycare and they have to take care of their child, this emergency paid sick leave would apply to them as well as the FMLA expansion. And then lastly, they're experiencing any other substantially similar conditions specified by the Secretaries of Health and Human Services, Treasury, and the Secretary of Labor. That one's a little more vague. I think they're just adding that in case there's some additional issues related to COVID. So what is the benefit amount? It provides up to 80 hours of paid sick leave at the employee's regular rate of pay. So this applies to all employees, part-time, full-time, anybody who's working for your business. For the reasons 4, 5, and 6 that were on that list, the regular rate would be paid at 2/3. So the first 3 reasons, 1, 2, and 3, would be 100% of their regular rate of pay, while 4, 5, and 6 would be 2/3 of their regular rate of pay. So they do have caps on the amounts that you would be required to pay out unpaid sick leave, just like the expansion of FMLA. It is capped pretty high at $511 per day, or $5,110. So basically, a full-time person who is making more than $511 per day would have it capped at $511 per day. All right, we can move to the next one. All right, so what is the effective date? What are the notice requirements? For the paid sick leave provisions, after the first sick day, an employer may require an employee to follow reasonable notice procedures. So basically, as the situation we know is very dynamic, you may have an employee who requests the time off. After that first day, you would basically just want to ask them to check in probably once every day or every other day to let you know when they're intending to return. And depending on the situation, you may want them to stay out for that full 2 weeks if they themselves are sick or are exposed to someone who is sick or caring for someone who is sick. So both of these provisions do take effect, as we mentioned, on April 1st. They're going to remain in place until December 31st. So any requests for paid sick leave related to COVID for any of those 6 reasons listed, or requests for FMLA under the expansion, those requests can come in up until December 31st of this year. So that's all we have. Hopefully can answer some questions. And I think we have a general question and answer session. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think we can go ahead and do that. I did want to ask the presenters, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, if you feel comfortable with me sharing this with the people who participated, this slide deck? in
Yes,
PDF?
and yeah, we're fine with that. And we actually, I forgot to mention, I apologize, that Karen does have a one-page client alert. Actually, it's 2 pages, I believe, client alert that we provided to all of our clients with this information and a little more detail on some of the exemptions and other requirements that if anybody wants a copy of that, they can just send her their email and she'll follow up with that alert for them as well.
And we'll send out all the presenters' contact information if you want to get in contact with them personally and ask them any questions and tap into their wisdom. Right now, we'll take any group questions if you want to type it into the chat, or if you're feeling bold, you can just speak up. Unmute yourself. All right, everybody, it was just so thorough. We have no questions.
I have a question for Cassie. Cassie, a lot of businesses are struggling with the decisions on when, if, how to lay off, or temporary layoffs for people. How does that come into play with the April 1st deadline for the FMLA so that they're not obligated or incur additional liabilities related to that act?
Sure. So that is definitely a question that we've had from a lot of our clients as well, and I know that's a concern. Currently, obviously if an employee is not actively working for you, then you're not obligated to pay them paid sick or place them on a leave of absence. So if there are businesses out there who want to temporarily furlough people, and that makes the most sense for their business, then those people would be eligible for unemployment. Every state across the U.S. is waiving their wait periods. They're allowing people to collect unemployment immediately. It's just difficult for them to actually get the claim filed and get through because there are so many, unfortunately. Basically, if they're not actively working for you, then no, you're not required to provide them with paid sick or a leave of absence. I hope if that answers the question.
No, that's great. I mean, that's at Armada. Yeah, Insperity is my HR provider, and thank you, Karen. Thank you, Patsy. But that was some of the information that we had to take into consideration. Again, my thought process is I don't want to hamstring this future pent-up demand, as it's been called, that's probably going to be occurring. So the temporary layoffs or the furloughs were a great opportunity for me to make sure that people got to continue with their health insurance, be able to still file for unemployment, but I can bring them back as soon as I can get more work into the pipeline.
Right. And that process may vary by company depending on what their benefits allow them to do. Our contract, with our benefits company and our clients allows us to continue their benefits. We consider it a leave of absence, and we're allowed to continue their benefits for them. But that can vary depending on, what the benefits contract is with each individual company.
We had a question for HR Jen, everyone. Will employees who are hired after April 1st be covered in these emergency FMLA and leave?
Yes. So the emergency FMLA expansion has a 30-day employment requirement. So anybody who is hired after the 1st would not be eligible for the expanded leave until they'd been there for at least 30 days. But the paid sick leave portion applies to all employees regardless of when they were hired through the end of the year.
Ron, am I showing the right slide? It's hard for me to navigate between chat. Okay. We also will send, like I said, we're going to send out all of these links. Darla Heller has been putting some links in the chat. We will compile all those, and all participants who've registered, we're going to email that out to you and get it back out as well as a slide deck. A couple things. There's no other questions. Any other questions?
Hi, Rebecca Olson here. I have a quick question for Scott in reference to his cash flow. I know a lot of businesses, just with the uncertainty economically, don't quite know how to do a weekly cash flow projection because there's a lot of variables. We're seeing a lot of layoffs and a lot of vendors that are, back ordered on products. So do you have any recommendations for businesses trying to put something together? I know we just are dealing with kind of a lot of unknowns that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, that's one of those things that a lot of small businesses are going to have to really, really do the math to figure out what makes the most economic sense for them. And that starting point has to be that cash flow. I'm working with other small businesses to try to help them, figure that out. It is difficult, but if their accountant's not available, if they're, if they don't have people within finance in their companies, we're willing to help as well. I've got a team of number nerds who are sitting on the bench looking for things to do. So that is very important. You have to look at your cash on hand. You have to be really honest about what projections you should expect in terms of money coming in. You have to question your receivables because just like everybody else, they're looking for deferred payments. They don't know what to do. They may not even be at the location where they're receiving bills. So you've got to question your receivables, make conservative estimates. You should know your numbers in terms of the expenses that are going out. Look for ways to reduce those as well, either temporarily or permanently, and then and basically do the math, right? And start to project out over the weeks. For us, when we got all the best information that we could possibly get for, available today, now I can make those decisions. That information may change next week. I don't want to permanently harm my business long term without making good decisions. And I think that's the most important thing.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you. And a couple things, notes on your slide deck you see there. We learned we had an SBA webinar yesterday. The key takeaways that we got from that was go ahead and apply. It doesn't hurt to apply. It's not going to hurt you. It's going to make you, it's a first come, first served basis on these loans. Get in there early before the money's run out and you're applying. You don't have to take it once you get there and you start doing it. They've really limited the amount of paperwork necessary. So you just need your financial statements to do that. And we've got plenty of great accountants in the chamber to help you with that if you need to put that together. And, but go ahead and get that done and get your name in the line if you're even thinking you're going to need to tap into that help. They're federal dollars, not through your local bank on this one. And so what you're seeing, the stimulus package is coming through and being voted on by the House is different. We're starting to unpack that. That's an 880-page document if you want it. We'll send it to you. And some other links that you want tax, the IRS.gov regarding some tax relief. Federal Reserve took some measures to help. And then we are constantly updating our website with these links. So you don't have to memorize them all. If you go to our brokenarrowchamber.com, and then we have a coronavirus web page where we're putting our link. And on the other, oh dear goodness, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry. I recommend anyone who does this, if you are going to host, have 2 screens because it's not very easy when you don't have 2 screens. That has been my learning in the Zoom world. And finally, you'll want to join us for our last, we have 2 webinars next week, and that is creating an online store for small retailers. So we're seeing many of our retailers need help, and then how to set up a store since they can't have a lot of people in their store currently. So we have some people who are doing that, Nathan Hall, to help you know how to do that from a perspective of advertising that once you get set up. Access to capital with the word that will be really more digging into the new stimulus package once it's passed and understanding that, unpacking how you can access some of that money, as well as local money as well. So Rose Washington, Javier Guamara, and Rebecca Olson will be helping you navigate that. So you can register online. They're all free. And I want to thank all of our speakers again for taking the time and giving us some valuable knowledge, and we'll be sending this out. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.